It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Thomas Kopankiewicz. Thomas is Singapore's first silver medalist for esports at the 2019 SEA Games held in the Philippines. He is a veteran in the pro gaming scene for over 8 years and has competed at multiple regional and international tournaments, such as DreamHack and the Intel Extreme Masters. He is now a full-time content specialist on YouTube under Wa Banana, as well as his own platforms. Without further ado, please welcome Thomas to present on the topic of how to win an esports SEA Games medal. Thomas, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. The only one without too many degrees and PhDs here. Also one of the few with Mr. as his salutation. So you can take everything I share with a pinch of salt. But all right, jokes aside. All right, here is my presentation. So I agree with a lot of the things that everyone has been saying. So I'm more of your practical guinea pig doing the presentation here. So everyone talks about the theory, and I would actually prove to you guys that I myself have been doing a lot of these without the scientific know-how. I just knew that it was good for me. So here's how to win an esports SEA Games medal. And we'll talk about the parallels of esports and sports, and basically going through my whole process of the unseen preparation behind esports. So quick jump in of who I am in case people haven't been watching the news or I didn't do enough for my fame. I started playing my first pro tournament in about 2012. This was for StarCraft 2, so a strategy game, a real-time strategy game. I participated in multiple international competitions such as IEMs, DreamHacks, WCS, global tournaments. And throughout all this, I was balancing school and gaming through what I would call an efficient practice regime that I created for myself. Eventually, we'll get to the practice regime as we go along. Eventually, I took a hiatus due to stress and national service coming up, and I channeled that creativity into YouTube instead. And that's where I am now, creating YouTube content. I'm a content lead, scriptwriter, director for YouTube channels and my own stuff as well. And when SEA Games was announced, I actually came back to prepare for this tournament, and I got the silver medal. Hopefully, I will join another one. But for now, I'm trying to invest my time into teaching or just spreading the message behind the psychology, medical stuff, and hopefully give a little bit of the right influence and perspective to this industry as a whole. So yeah, my content for today will be, we'll do a quick introduction, then we'll move into the how to practice, the mechanics and the mentality behind it, importance of body awareness, why esports is alike sports, and finally we'll do a Q&A. And so we start with how to practice. So a lot of people are talking about this. I think throughout there will be some similarities with some of the other speakers, but playing and practicing a game is very, very different. So playing, basically, a lot of people just play the game. When they start out, they hope to get good. Like I think Joshua was mentioning how someone tell you to run faster, they just say, "Oh, just run more," right? And sure, with enough talent, you'd get to a point where you are decent or competitive. But to break that barrier to go from competitive to professional, this real practice has to come in. Okay, so comparatively, how people would just blame on, for example, you lose a game, you just say, "Oh, I lost those few fights," or those few rounds maybe can win, then we could have won the whole game, or "Oh, this game I didn't shoot very well," that kind of thing. Those are very lackluster. It disregards the whys and the hows of previous wins and losses, whereas practicing requires very specific analysis after each game, especially losses, to analyze what went wrong and how you can fix it on a very detailed level. And in a lot of the times, for me especially, I actually spend much more time in analysis and studying rather than playing the game itself. So for example, an 8-hour practice day, actually 4 to 5 hours is spent on studying and analysis. So for example, the ways to compare could be like, at the 10-minute mark, did I kill as many creeps as my opponent? Or should we all have attacked mid? Should someone have taken over my position in this game? And should we have pushed with different strategies? All these kind of tweaks could be tweaked. Or for example, if you always notice you have a weakness at the 6-minute mark of your game, you're always open for attacks. The ways to tweak your strategy to be more robust defensively at a specific amount of time without losing too much economy. A lot of layers to these kind of strategizing. All right, now we move on to mechanical improvements. So in every game or sport or element of life, there will be mechanical details that require improvements. So these are what we call the mechanics of the game. I generally like to believe that everything I teach about or share about the stuff that I apply in games actually can be applied in all facets of life. So which I find very interesting. So for example, this is level 1 would be, for example, dealing with supply blocks in a real-time strategy game. Hitting last hits in a oh sorry, I missed the slide. There we go. Okay, so for example, level 1 would deal with simple stuff like supply blocks, getting your last hits, and in a first-person shooter would be clicking heads, getting the right headshots all the time. So this is probably the most boring part of the game, but the more time you spend on this, your foundation gets built to make you focus on other things better and make your overall gameplay more efficient. It's similar to how in basketball, if you have to worry about whether shooting the basketball and whether it goes in or not, if you have to worry about that all the time, you wouldn't have time to think about strategies. You wouldn't have time to think about your movements, how the pieces are going to move on the court. And so this is why dealing stuff with level 1 is very important. No one really does this enough, especially people wanting to go pro. They don't just focus on these aspects alone when they're practicing. They're still worried about, okay, my next team fight or my next big fight. Honestly, this is the first step to. So for example, I used to have a coach where actually back in the first slide, you would have seen that I was actually talking to this player called Grubby, and he was the one who taught me a lot of these things. So shout out to him. For example, he would teach me on this GIF you see where there are workers mining away on the minerals. So two workers can actually stack on one mineral patch. And there are also mineral patches which are just milliseconds closer to the main base as well, so that you can get minerals slightly faster. But there are situations where 3 workers can stack on one mineral patch, and so the third worker wouldn't mine until one of them is off the mineral patch. And that actually causes like a 5% decrease in your mining efficiency. And so when I used to practice with this coach, the moment he saw that happen, he would quit the replay and he would stop that game there. And it wouldn't have mattered anything else that I did. And it was quite frustrating practicing with that, but this is how specific it can go with these level 1 practices. Now, when you move on to level 2, maybe about taking fights, this gets a bit more exciting, but it's also very hard to replicate because, for example, in a first-person shooter, you would have to start a custom map, get a few people to just stand at the corners, and you guys would have to restart this over and over again. In Dota, you probably load up cheat mode and practice these engagements. But doing these are mundane because it's such a small aspect of the game. It's like doing 2 + 2s consecutively rather than solving a challenging math equation. But once again, very important. An honorable mention towards mechanical improvements are warm-up games. For example, you want something to also practice but also be engaging and fun, so you throw in something different. This one is called Osu. It's a music and rhythm game to practice your click accuracy. So yeah, different ways to deal with mechanical improvements. Now we move on to strategical improvements. So after you've developed your instincts to a good level, now you can copy and learn from the pros and their strategies. So a lot of people will be like, hey, why copy? Yeah, mine is better. But pros have a very precise build orders, right? They usually have a slightly better sense to the game. And after they practice and build off of that sense, they have very efficient builds and strategies behind the games. So for the same build order that you see me trying to complete, I would do it faster and with more army than someone who is even just slightly below my level. And it's not because I'm naturally fast, and it's really purely because of practice and refining your builds. And so beyond just copying, we move on to the next part, which I would call benchmarking. Okay, so benchmarking for StarCraft 2, for example, what I would do is at the 2-minute mark of a game, I would look, do I have the same amount of workers or army as my opponents? And then I would check the 5th minute mark. Do I have the same amount of army and not as my opponents, but as the strategy that I'm copying from the professional? So at the 5-minute mark, do I have the same amount of workers and army as this professional at his 5-minute mark? Same thing at 10-minute mark. I can compare them constantly and see, am I off? Off by how much? Can I improve myself, or can I be even better than this optimized build order? It's usually very rare for StarCraft because everything is optimized to the maximum already, but maybe you can tweak it to fit for yourself. And one comparison I would give is something like sprinting. So back to sprinting again. if you were a 100-meter sprinter, of course, I'm not expert, but I'm trying to apply this everywhere. So if you're a 100-meter sprinter, you wouldn't just run 100 meters and see where you go wrong along the 100-meter. We can exactly look at just the first 10 meters, the first 30 meters, 50 meters, and see which specific muscle group do you need to work on, whether it's your acceleration, your stamina to sustain the same speed through the 100 meters, or whether it's a picking up of pace, something like that. So it's the same thing when it comes to esports, where there are very specific details that you need to fine tune rather than just overall gameplay. And so finally, we go down to application, which is incorporating your strategy to apply the same build order, practicing about 100 games, and that's the only way you really see the weaknesses and strengths of a strategy. And off of that, you realize how to apply it. Then you develop your game plan. So a game plan is required, which basically is the game flow is the flow of strategies from one game to the next. Because within a best of series, so best of 3, best of 5, best of 7, you can show the same build opening, but it can move in different ways. Similar to this this imagery on top, you can see it's the same opening, but it can stem into different parts. And one example, non-gaming would be like chess. The first 20 moves might be the same, and then from there on out, someone might do something different. And this is also why I usually like to practice custom games, so games with specific players, because it's a better metric where you practice against game flow throughout your game flow and have your build orders throughout a series practice rather than playing against randoms online when you go into a tournament. So this is a fun kind of, it's CBA and not ABC. I've created this fun little acronym. So once again, as I'm talking about all this, I think this can be applied across anything. One very practical one would be like cooking, for example. It's the same thing. You can start off with rice and eggs and tomatoes, and it doesn't have to be fried rice. It can be a risotto, and yeah, so it's a fun knowledge. So one fun thing about this is that you can actually bring your cheat sheets into exams for gaming. So this is me at IEM, and you see I'm holding my little paper there, and that's actually my my build orders and strategy sheet for what to do through the game. So I don't need to remember. I can have it done like in the tournament itself. So next we move on to mental rehearsals. Now this is one of my favorite parts, and honestly I think very little people do this once again who are competitive and not pros, or even pros in fact. So for example, I actually flew down to Australia to play in a smaller tournament and barely broke even on my expenses. Luckily I got third there, I think. And I broke even on my expenses just so I could prepare mentally for SEA Games. Because when you are at an event and you have flashing lights and you have photographers around you, people cheering to every mistake or triumph you get, it's vastly different from being at the comfort of your own home with nice lights and a little plant there on top of your CPU. It's not that fancy. So you can see the left picture, that one I took, that's kind of how it looks like if I'm facing a crowd, especially on stage. So the adrenaline levels, the stress levels are very different. Your emotional levels are changed as well. So you would want to adapt to those kind of changes. The same reason why you would want to use your same mouse, keyboard, and knowing monitor sizes for competition, the heights, adjusting the heights of your monitor, and to be as similar as possible to your home and practice environment, which I think some of the previous speaker mentioned as well. One example that we'll give here is actually the StarCraft 1's the best StarCraft 1 player here. His name is called Flash. And you can see right here, he actually uses a ruler to measure the specific distance that his keyboard is away from the table end, so he knows where to rest his hand. This one's a bit extreme, but I mean, he's the best, so we can't really complain, right? So not many people do this, but it can go to these extremes. So I just wanted to show this kind of as an example. And yeah, so it's quite interesting here as well. Beyond that, you can also do a lesser level of mental rehearsal by, once again, custom games, practicing versus specific people, doing a best of 7, and not going beyond that. If you lose in a best of 7, there's no start again. That's it. You play the next day. Some stuff like that, so that there's an added pressure to that moment of practice. And also you can also sit at a stage or sit somewhere and kind of envision who you're playing against or what the emotions will be like, stuff like this. And so we move on to body awareness. Okay, so body awareness, we'll start with mental blocks. So the same thing with mental awareness, it kind of bleeds into mental blocks as well, where there are situations where you can be playing against a certain player, against a certain matchup or a team, or even in winning moments, means like you are 2-1 up, one game away from winning, and you suddenly just lose 3-2, and that happens all the time. That's happened to me before, it's happened to other players. And so this is a very it's a very common thing, and this requires a specific amount of mental coaching and mental awareness to get around, whether it's more mental rehearsals or relying more on the mechanics of the game so you can shut down your emotions. There are different ways to deal with it, and yeah. So we'll move on to some examples. Adrenaline levels and blood pressure rises in a tournament as well. So I know this is a bit wordy, but I'll cover it, don't worry. So this first excerpt is actually from a chess journal excerpt, where they talk about how it seems absurd that two humans seated for hours, exerting themselves in no greater manner than just moving their hands, can face physical demands. So in October 2018, Polar, a US-based company that tracks heart rates, monitored chess players during a tournament and found that 21-year-old Russian Grandmaster Mikhail Antipov had burned 560 calories in just 2 hours of sitting and playing chess. So that's the same as Roger Federer playing in 1 hour of tennis. And so then other studies also showed that you can burn up to 6,000 calories a day while playing in a tournament, 3 times the average normal person can consume in a day based on breathing rates, blood pressure, and all this. So it's very much on par with actual athletes. And this is why being aware what your body can handle is very important. And then we will move into the solutions of what you can do around it. Because even normal practicing cannot achieve this, which is why rehearsals are very important. Mental rehearsals to put yourself through the same amount of stress is very important. So my easiest way, for example, is breathing to calm myself down. I do a very quick 3 deep breath thing. And maybe one of the doctors can talk about this if it's an actual thing, but it works for me. So for me, 3 deep breaths helps to reset a lot of adrenaline and reset emotions. In fact, sighing as well, going like, doing this like a good 2 to 3 times is also one of the, I think I read this somewhere, okay? So, which also helps to reset a good amount of adrenaline and emotional stress. And on top of that, understanding your own metabolism is very important. For example, I myself, I take Red Bull 50-50 with water, because if I take just Red Bull to energize myself, I usually get a sugar crash, or I take fruit juices, that works for me, candy bars, banana. And we will also talk about how, for example, Steph Curry during a timeout, he can vastly reduce his heart rate. So his amazing ability comes from this during a timeout of just 1 minute and 30 seconds, which is very similar to gaming, how we only have a minute break from game to game. He will vastly decrease his heart rate back down again, reset his adrenaline levels, so that when he starts again, he's like dead calm. And so I haven't tried putting sandbags on my rib cages yet, but maybe that's something that we want to try out someday. But yes, this same ideology behind sports can be applied in esports as well to really help you focus on the game and kind of defeat this mental stress element. And so we move on to part 2, which is, when I talked about knowing your body as well, if you have to sustain through a best of 7, which is a very long series, you will need to know how long your body can sustain through. So going through that amount of adrenaline and that amount of emotional stress requires a lot from your body. So personally, I build stamina through sports. I play a lot of basketball. I build energy through nutrition. So eating fruits, having a balanced diet, and sleep is very important for that as well. And sleep bleeds a lot into reaction time. So it really helps with the reaction time of things. I've tested this myself. I have tried a reaction time test of 4 hours of sleep for a few days, and then I've tried one with 7 hours of sleep of a few days, and it does improve. I don't know whether it's placebo because I'm a 1-person sample size. Any doctor here would say that it is an unreliable test, but it works for me. So fantastic. So especially in final games when you have to play best of 7, that goes up to a good 3 to 4 hours. And adrenaline fluctuation going in and out of games is insane. So when I'm playing, my adrenaline level rise. When I have a break after 3 games, maybe for 5 to 10 minutes, they drop. And then once I go back into games, they have to rise again. This bodily stress that is implemented on my body takes even more energy than just sustaining adrenaline. I think. So again, the doctors have to fact check me on that. But I feel it myself. So mine, everything comes from experience. So to deal with this, once again, being physically fit helps. So then I also did a physiotherapy session with Rehab Lab. I think maybe some people might have seen this on CNA, where they were teaching me how the way I sit can reduce stress on your arms and back when gaming. In fact, a patient was sharing a bit about this just before me. So it is very much so. The less stress you have on your muscles, in fact, can allow you to sustain the energy that you need to deal with the stress levels and adrenaline levels better as well. And so we'll move into practice conditions. So I practice a good 6 to 8 hours every day when I'm practicing for a tournament. Your eyes need rest. I always play with lights on. I love how Desmond was sharing about this just now. So I always thought that, because I read somewhere as well that this wasn't proven, but when Desmond shared it, I was like, yes, okay, I'm doing the right thing. It just felt logical to me. If you have a screen in the middle that is bright and it's dark around you, your camera, if you use the camera to try to take a picture of that, it would have to focus in between. Our eyes the same, right? So that it just seems very tiring. So if everything just blends well, that seems like the easiest way to play. I don't play against the window. There'll be backlight, and so I'm very careful. I have perfect eyesight, even though I play for 8 hours a day for a very long time. Some might say it's genetics, but I think I take good care of it, so that helps. Wrist and forearm stretches definitely are important, so to reduce strain and likelihood of carpal tunnel. A lighter mouse and a keyboard key resistance helps too. So you can ask me about that if you want in the Q&A what products I use, but I personally am using the lightest wireless mouse there is in the industry, which helps a lot. And for someone who plays StarCraft and the APM goes up to 200 to 300 clicks per minute, I also like keyboards with the lowest key resistance possible. So they've created keys for that. For FPS, this might not matter so much, but yeah, for real-time strategy for sure. Hydrate and eat fruits definitely helps with your energy levels as well. So we move on to then why it is a sport. So the amount of preparation, right? So I think this is more on a scientific level as well, that the amount of preparation behind an esport will rival just any sport. And just with the decrease of the need and physicality in the moment. So hence we are adding an E to create its own category. So we call it esports. And so there may be players out there who can thrive on none of the factors that I talk about, that do not focus on their physical or body awareness, and they can still do perfect. One example in basketball was Allen Iverson. So he's one of the Hall of Famous basketball players, and he never wanted to go to a gym because he just felt like weightlifting was too heavy. And he still did great, right? Nothing wrong. But the mechanical practice that he's put in is still there. And maybe he doesn't put in the physical side of things. But if you are aware of what your body can take and how to utilize your body in those manners, then go ahead. It's more of an awareness thing. But for an average to good to great player, applying such routines and regimens will definitely get you a good 10% edge in performance, which is why I am very confident that no matter what StarCraft competition I come back in, even if I don't play for a year, practicing for about 6 months can get me up to speed with any player. And yeah, so it's really an edge up. And so with all this information that I'm trying to share, and hopefully, and I hear a lot of our professionals and the speakers today, in fact, knowing a lot about this direction, I hope essentially with the aid of medical prowess and knowledge that a team can be formed around the know-how for improving practice efficiency and perhaps also in treatment. And for this is definitely still a newer industry, as big as it is. And when the demand continues to grow, there will need to be preparation and understanding behind what is required to perform at the high levels. And so this is where I will end. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I will open it up for Q&A. I think we're